let's talk about Don Juan. This tone poem for orchestra was written in 1888 by the great German composer Richard Strauss and first performed in Weimar on November 11 of 1889. So, what is a tone poem? A tone poem is a piece of orchestral music, usually in a single continuous movement, that aims to illustrate or evoke the content of a poem, short story, novel, painting, landscape, or other non-musical source. We can say that Strauss is the absolute master of musical storytelling and description, and you will see why I'm telling you this. In this piece, we follow Don Juan's journey through a range of romances and his disappointment with them and life in general. To understand Strauss's version of Don Juan, we have to picture this legendary hero as a romantic young man searching for the women of his dreams. A dreamer, an idealist who, by facing continuous disappointment and not being able to find the perfect woman, feels like he loses his purpose in life. To put some context around this piece, let's take a short trip back in time, specifically to the 18th century in central Germany, and more specific to a city called Weimar. Period from 1758 to 1832 is denoted as the Golden or the Classical Age in Weimar. Because of its high level of cultural activity, the city became an important cultural center of Europe, especially since Goethe, a literary celebrity, first moved to the city in 1775. The time after Goethe's death in 1832 is denoted as the Silver Age because Weimar remained an influential cultural center, putting some emphasis in fostering music. For instance, Franz Liszt, one of the greatest pianists of all time and also one of the biggest music figures ever, moved to Weimar in 1842 to become the Grand Ducal Court conductor. Music aside, another great mind of this era like Friedrich Nietzsche moved to Weimar in 1897. So, this is the place and time when this great masterpiece was first performed, written when Richard Strauss was 24 years old and premiered a year later, 131 years ago. Because context is everything, I will highlight some details I found interesting about Strauss's life from its beginning until when he composed Don Juan. Richard George Strauss was born in Munich in 1864. His father, Franz Joseph Strauss, was a member of the Munich Court Opera. He was considered one of the best French horn players of his time. At the age of 4, Richard Strauss started piano lessons, and by the age of 6, he was already composing his first works, Schneider Polka and Weihnachtslied. By his 18th birthday, he had composed 140 works. In 1881, his official career began. His festive march for large orchestra was released, and at the same time, Strauss discovered a new world, that of Richard Wagner. In 1883, which marked the year of Wagner's death, Hans von Bülow, one of the most significant Wagner conductors of the time, took Strauss under his wing. In the following year, and at the recommendation of Bülow, Strauss became the music director in Meiningen. This is where he intensified his understanding of Wagner and also of Liszt and Bruckner. Strauss left Meiningen in April 1886 to return to his hometown Munich. Inspired by his travels to Italy, encouraged by the way by Brahms, Strauss dedicated himself at this time to the study of the symphonic composition and reached the peak in his orchestration. 2 years later, in 1888, Strauss created his first symphonic poems, such as the symphonic fantasy Out of Italy, as well as Macbeth and of course Don Juan. Let's talk about the plot of this legendary tale. The Don Juan's legend, one of history's most notable myths, began in 1630 when Tirso de Molina, a Spanish Baroque dramatist, poet, and Catholic monk, published El Burlador de Sevilla, The Trickster of Seville, a fictional work based on the Spanish nobleman Don Juan Tenorio. Probably the most famous music version of Don Juan comes from Mozart's Don Giovanni, Don Juan in Italian. Please just listen to it, it is so amazing. In this opera, Don Juan is a shameless womanizer, among other things. But the real deal happened when he seduced a woman whose father is a commendatore. This is a commander. When the commendatore discovers what Don Juan has done to his daughter, he challenges him to a duel, and then Don Juan kills him, of course. Sometime later, Don Juan comes upon a statue of the dead commendatore and asks the statue to dinner. Come on, Mike, who does that? So, in one of the most breathtaking and dramatic moments in the history of the opera, the actual statue arrives for dinner, takes Don Juan by the hand, and drags him into hell. Mind-blowing. But this is not the Don Juan's plot from which Strauss took inspiration. The Hungarian writer Nikolaus Linau's portrayal of Don Juan was adopted by Richard Strauss for his symphonic poem. Published in 1851, this story was more sympathetic to Don Juan. Linau wrote, "My Don Juan is not hot-blooded man eternally pursuing women. It is the longing in him a woman who is to him incarnate womanhood, and to enjoy in the one all the women on earth whom he cannot possess as individuals. Because he does not find her, although he reels from one to another, at last disgust seizes hold of him, and this disgust is the devil that fetches him." So, what I just did is something that we all have to do before preparing an audition excerpt. We have to gather as much information as we can, decide what is useful for us and what's not, and then apply it into our practice and consequently to our performance. And now music begins. Let's start with making a division of the excerpt. In order to create my own storyline, I used my imagination and decided to divide it into 3 parts. I call them Introduction, Don Juan's theme, and the first scene or first love encounter. I also used the full score to put my marks. The large orchestra is used in an incredibly virtuosic way, both in terms of the orchestration itself and the difficulty of the individual parts, which always crop up in orchestral auditions for nearly any instrument. I put the focus primarily on the rhythmic material and how Strauss intertwined his musical ideas. We need to know exactly how our part interacts with the remaining instruments of the orchestra. You can also analyze its harmony, but it takes time and it gets tricky with composers like Strauss. For instance, in a very simplistic way, the piece begins in the tone of E major, but the first chord is a C major chord that leads dramatically to a dominant in the second bar, which is a B major chord, and then it finally goes to the connected E major. What I'm trying to say is that you must know the score and must know what's happening around. This is chamber music on a really big scale. Let's dive into the performance preparation by having a closer look to the excerpt division I made. The introduction corresponds to the first 8 bars of the piece. As you can see, Strauss's writing is highly chromatic. Don Juan is leaping into action from the very first note of the piece. The opening starts in the strings. This figure begins not on the first beat, but just slightly after, creating a sense of anxious forward motion. It rushes through the wind section and then it comes back to the strings. This frenetic opening represents Don Juan's passion, his desire. The melody starts from the lowest open G up to the high B on the E string, a span of 3 octaves and a major third, a very wide range in less than 3 bars. The wide range of this melody contributes to this sense of restlessness. The cymbal crashes after a general crescendo, the descending motif in woodwinds and strings, and then a rhythmic timpani lead us to the second section. The Don Juan's introduction theme. It starts from the 9th bar and finishes in the letter B. This introduction theme is overwhelming and describes an impulsive Don Juan whom nothing and no one can stop. As listeners, we can hear a collective show of virtuosity through all this section. There is a sparkling range of effects used here. This is a festival of textures, an explosion of adolescent energy. Finally, the first scene starts from the letter B, up to 5 bars before C. Now that we have already presented the personality of Don Juan's character, it is now when we can be as creative as we want and let our imagination flow. I created for this part of the excerpt a short storyline so I could go from the abstract to the concrete. There is no good or bad storylines. This story is not even taken from Lynette's tale. In fact, our final purpose must be to find the one that matches our inner feelings. Don Juan is one of the most complex excerpts we can find in an audition list. We find it in almost every audition around the world. One of the reasons is because this excerpt is full of rhythmic variety, virtuosic passages. We have to play along all of the fingerboard, and on top of that, the entire excerpt has to be played with tremendous energy. There is a lot of different rhythms and melodies, so it is really important to play them with good articulation in both hands. The phrases here are really long. As we could see in the general score, a lot is happening at the same time we are playing. So it is convenient to remind ourselves every time we practice that we shouldn't hear choppy phrases. Instead, we should try to connect them as best as we can. A good quality sound, dynamic contrast, shaping the phrases have to be, of course, added to the practice list. There's a lot of information about how to play or how to practice Don Juan, as well as fingerings and bowings that you can use. So I will show you the red flags of this excerpt and the reason why this excerpt is in almost every audition list in the world. We should see the opening as a solo moment. As a general rule, we start from the string a little bit above the middle of the bow, as a matter of having the bow anchored to the ground. This crispy sound helps for the clarity of the following semiquavers. We want to hear every single note. It would be good if we can hold back those notes and try not to rush. Managing well the strings crossing is key in this beginning. In the first bar, I shift to third position in the C, because with the third position fingering, the long E will have a more energetic vibrato. We have to try to fuse this long E to the rest of the phrase and avoid tension and release bow pressure as we go to the top. Remember, we have to make our instrument sing, not cry out for help. In the fourth bar of Don Juan's theme, playing the F natural in tune is a common issue. A good way to nail this shift is by using the phrase in our benefit. After the high D, we can take the time to anticipate the shift and position our hand in the right place. I think it is a good idea if we shape the triplets. I prefer playing them on the string, so I can feel them holding back a little bit the tempo and enjoy each one of the notes. Be aware on every shift. Try to make them as clear as you can. Try not to rush on the quarter triplets before the scarier passage of this excerpt. One of the tips that help is when, in a deliberate way, we switch our attention to our right hand and release the tension of our entire body. This, and holding back the tempo, gives us precious time to focus on the sound making, makes us enjoy more what we're playing, and gives a sense of clarity and control to the listener. The triplets at the end are not as fast as we think. Hold back the tempo and always try to articulate every note and shape the phrase. Let's hear it.